Carole Lombard's story begins far from Hollywood, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where she was born Jane Alice Peters on October 6, 1908. She was the youngest of 3 children in a comfortable, successful family. Her grandfather, John Claus Peters, co-founded the Horton Manufacturing Company, which by 1924 produced half the washing machines in the world. He also owned lumber businesses and built the Wayne Hotel. Jane's childhood home was filled with security and privilege, until the comfort cracked apart sooner than anyone expected. In 1913, a devastating flood hit Fort Wayne after 11 inches of rain fell in 2 storms. Jane was just 4, watching as more than 15,000 people lost their homes and 6 died. The Peters house held one of the neighborhood's only telephones, so it became a center for rescue efforts. Her mother organized food and clothing for displaced families while Jane helped in small ways. Later she joked it was her first close call with drowning, but the experience planted a sense of responsibility and resilience that would define her life. A year later, her parents' marriage fractured. Her father's injury and erratic moods became too much, and her mother moved the children to Los Angeles, never returning to Indiana except for support checks that arrived inconsistently. California changed everything. Jane grew into a talented, athletic teenager who outran and outplayed most boys her age. At 12 she won trophies for running, swimming and volleyball, and at 13 she was spotted on a baseball field by director Alan Dwan. He needed a tomboy for a small role and thought she was perfect. The 2-day job didn't launch a career, but it lit something in her. By 15 she was voted May Day Queen at school, and the following year she signed a $75 per week contract with Fox. Hollywood gave her a new name, Carole Lombard, later adding they for luck, and early roles had her smiling, screaming and fainting on cue. She had beauty and spark, but studios saw only a pretty blonde they could mold. At 18 her life veered sharply when a car crash sent her through a windshield. A deep gash carved across her face, leaving a permanent scar. She had 14 stitches with no anesthesia and spent days with her eyes taped shut. The injury threatened her career, but instead of giving up she learned camera angles, lighting, and how to hide the scar with instinctive precision. Between 1927 and 1929 she worked in Mack Sennett's slapstick shorts, girls in bathing suits slipping, sliding, and getting hit with pies. They weren't glamorous roles, but the physical comedy taught her timing and loosened her insecurities. Even so, Hollywood continued to typecast her as the vapid blonde, regardless of the talent she was starting to display. Her career gradually improved through late 1920s features like Show Folks, High Voltage, and Big News. She married actor William Powell in 1931, a surprising match between her wild, irreverent personality and his cool sophistication. They cared for each other deeply but were mismatched, and the marriage ended after 2 years, though they remained close friends. In 1933, forced by Paramount into the horror film Supernatural, which she hated, she endured the experience and moved forward, determined to find material worthy of her abilities. Over the next few years her pay rose from $350 per week to $3,500 as she gained confidence and recognition. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly. Director Howard Hawks saw her off-screen funny, loud, and completely uncensored, and cast her in 20th Century. When she stiffened on camera, Hawks tricked her by saying her co-star John Barrymore had insulted her. Furious, she confronted him, and the real Carole erupted into the performance. Critics saw an entirely new star. But just as her career surged, tragedy struck. In 1934, her boyfriend, singer Russ Columbo, died in a bizarre accident when an antique pistol discharged, and the bullet ricocheted into his skull. She was devastated, refused to speak of him publicly afterward, and many believed she carried the grief for the rest of her life. Work helped her heal. In Hands Across the Table, 1935, she found comic footing opposite Fred MacMurray, and in 1936 she starred in My Man Godfrey with her ex-husband Powell, delivering what many consider her finest performance. She earned her only Oscar nomination for the role. By 1937 she was the highest-paid star in Hollywood, making $450,000 a year. She joked proudly that 80% went to taxes to help the country. That year she and Clark Gable bought a 20-acre ranch in Encino, where they lived simply, raising chickens and planting fruit trees. She adored Nothing Sacred, her only Technicolor film, and though she suffered through the flop Fools for Scandal, she rebounded with the poignant In Name Only, 1939, and lighter fare like Made for Each Other and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. She had met Gable years earlier, but sparks flew in 1936 at the Mayfair Ball. They danced, traded jokes, and fell quickly into a romance that never eased. They married quietly in Kingman, Arizona, in 1939. She wanted children desperately and tried everything, but a miscarriage disguised publicly as appendicitis left her heartbroken. She reduced her film schedule, sought medical specialists, and kept hoping. Rumors of pregnancy followed her constantly, exhausting her emotionally. By 1941, she had largely retreated to the ranch, surrounding herself with animals and keeping up a brave front. After Pearl Harbor, Lombard threw herself into supporting the war effort. When Gable hesitated to take on public duties, she stepped in and joined a war bond tour that brought her to Indiana in January 1942. On January 15, she raised over $2 million in a single day, a staggering achievement. Restless to get home, she insisted on flying despite her mother's fear and Otto Winkler's protests. The three boarded TWA Flight 3, AD-3, ignoring the uneasy coincidence of numbers her mother mentioned. Heavy luggage and a last-minute load of military gear kept the fuel tanks from being filled completely. Blackout orders had switched off most navigation beacons. Shortly after departing Las Vegas, the pilot drifted 7 miles off course into restricted airspace. 13 minutes after takeoff at 7:20 p.m., the plane hit Potosi Mountain only 80 feet below the summit, killing all 22 aboard. It took searchers until the next morning to reach the crash site through snow and jagged rock. Lombard's body was badly burned. She was identified by a small wisp of blonde hair and a remaining diamond earring Gable had given her. Her wedding ring was never found, though Gable offered a reward that kept people searching for years. When he arrived in Nevada, he tried climbing the mountain himself before being forced back. He took the single charred ruby from her earring and later wore it around his neck. Her funeral on January 21 followed exactly the instructions she had left in her 1939 will. Roosevelt sent condolences and later awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, recognizing her as the first American woman to die in the line of duty during the war. Gable was crushed. He stopped eating, drank heavily, and watched her movies alone late at night. MGM tried to keep him from military service, but he enlisted anyway, telling friends he no longer cared if he survived.